And we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Great Debate. Israel, Palestine, our favorite topic. For those joining us for the first time, what is the Great Debate? It's a platform where people come together to find common ground on the most important issues of our time. It's not a debate where people come to fight. It's a debate where people come to find unity. We tackle the most challenging issues, the most complex issues, the most controversial and emotion-arousing issues. Why? Because these are the conversations that we need to have. You will find countless activists all over the world who are pro-Israel, and countless activists all over the world who are pro-Palestine. But how many are pro both? How many activists stand proudly and say, I am pro both Israel and Palestine. I am pro-peace. That is a rare occurrence. That is what we're doing here on the Great Debate. It's a pleasure to have you all here. As always, feel free to have a vibrant conversation in the comment section. Keep it respectful, the way our guests keep it respectful here. And that's it. Let's get started. I'm very excited to welcome my two guests. Let's flip this around a little bit. Woo! To my top left, Inon Dan Kehati, founder of The Home, an organization working to unite Israelis and Palestinians around a one-state solution, currently residing in Jerusalem. On my top right, Tarek Al Muhtaseb is an Australian Palestinian entrepreneur with a focus on protecting the traditions and rights of the Palestinians through advocacy and trade facilitation. His family is split between the cities of Jerusalem and Hebron. Welcome, guys. It's a pleasure to have you both here.
Great to be here again.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, the viewers, you might see a new aesthetic. I switched the software platform. This one's called StreamYard. I'm going to give them a shout out. No, they're not paying me, not yet at least, but sponsored by StreamYard. And it seems like there's some cool features. You could see the Great Debate logo on the bottom right and the top left, although it seems to be cut off by the live, but we'll fix that for next week. Great to have you all here. We're going to start with the topic of normalization. For those who are unfamiliar, normalization is the concept, or anti-normalization is the concept that is quite popular in Palestinian society, that you do not normalize with the enemy. You do not normalize with Israelis. That means you don't become their friends, you don't work for them. You're not engaged in day-to-day activity with Israelis, because in doing so, it's as if you are normalizing the treatment that Israel imposes on Palestinians. That is the anti-normalization narrative. There is a spectrum of normalization and anti-normalization, and that's what we're going to get into. So we're going to start with Inon. What are your thoughts on normalization, Inon?
I think it's bad. That's it. Yalla, bye. Ciao.
What's bad, normalization or anti-normalization?
I mean anti-normalization. Look, now to be serious, normalization is a very crucial step towards peace. I mean, regardless what solution we're going to have here, we have to make some kind of connection between Israelis and Palestinians, unless the premise is that there's not going to be a future with either Israelis or Palestinians here. So if you come with the premise that Palestinians and Israelis are going to stay here for the future, then you have to normalize the connections, the relationship between the people somehow. And what we do in The Home, we focus exactly about that. We making connections, especially between hostile communities, between the Jewish communities and the Palestinian communities in Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank. And we're basically making very normal connections between the people themselves from the bottom. Well, it's either meetings or picking up trash together, cleaning the hate, or just making conferences. And by the way, Adar, thank you very much for participating in one of our meetings that was 1 month ago, just before the lockdown that was 1 week ago. And that's what we do.
It was a great experience.
And the anti-normalization is actually counterproductive, especially for the Palestinians themselves, because it keeps them in a form of weakness, because the Palestinian leadership is very weak right now, and it doesn't allow any other voice to raise up And I think because it's feeling threat, it's trying to prevent from other people, other Palestinians to say different voices. And by the way, these Palestinians are not sellouts who are very pro-Israeli. I don't think they're pro-Israel as a state, but they are not against the Jewish people.
Great, thank you. So you see, you're for full normalization. You're all the way on one side of the spectrum. Israelis and Palestinians should be friends. Palestinians should create no border, no distance with Israelis until their conditions improve. That's your position?
That's correct. And I think it's a gradual process that should start from within the heart of the conflict, where the Jewish and the Palestinian communities are. Not Tel Aviv and Ramallah, who are also in distance. I'm not taking them out, but the focus should be on the hostile communities that live, for example, the Jewish community and the Palestinian community in Hebron. Because if there's going to be some kind of connection there, it's going to be much easier to fix it for the other tribes, other identities in our land. Thank you.
Tarek, the floor is yours. What are your thoughts on normalization?
Well, in regards to normalization, one of the biggest things is that unfortunately we're not in a normal environment. So while I can understand what Inon's trying to say, how we're trying to make people feel closer, I don't think anyone should be punished. I know that there's very severe repercussions for a lot of the time with normalization. I've heard that Inon has to cover people's faces up when he meets them. A lot of the Palestinians have to blur out their faces. I don't agree with that. But I think, as I've said previously, the reason why many Palestinians, not the PA, but just average Palestinians are uncomfortable with normalization is because, as you said earlier, it does look like it is legitimizing what is happening. And so while I'm all for individuals, I don't have an issue with individuals forming relationships and stuff like that. I definitely think it is in a way counterproductive if you just form a relationship but you don't air your grievances. Because at the end of the day, both of us, me and Inon, are advocating for the people we're connected to, and we're trying to do what's best for them and for both the groups. And so if I'm here and just speaking on behalf of the people I'm connected to, but I don't air their grievances, they're not going to be very happy. As in, I want us to cooperate, I want us to work together, but at the same time, I can't hang out with Israelis and then not bring up how people in Beit Jala and Beit Lahem are feeling, like enclosed in, or bring up what's happening at Al-Shuhada Street. Just like, for example, it would be kind of weird, I imagine Israelis would think it's weird if Inon never mentions why Israelis are scared to take down the wall. If Inon meets me and he's just spending the whole time listening to me tell my grievances and doesn't bring up one grievance, I don't think he'll be very popular with Israelis. So while I don't support what the PA does at all, I think normalization, it has to come with, Palestinians have to be able to explain why there is some, Israelis and Palestinians have to understand why there's an issue with normalization in a way. Because for us, we feel like we're on the losing end. And while it's good to meet Israelis, many Palestinians are very uncomfortable with the idea of meeting Israelis because they feel like it just tells Israelis, okay, it's all well and good, when there are a lot of issues. But I don't support the anti-normalization at the same time, if that makes sense. So I don't support people being locked up, and I don't think anyone should be punished for talking to Israelis or meeting with Inon and cleaning up, stuff like that. But at the same time, I think if they're going to do it, they have to say, look, this is happening in Nablus, this is happening in Bethlehem, Beit Jala, this is happening in Hebron. And in regards to what Inon said about the trouble spots meeting each other, it's an interesting concept, it's a good idea, but maybe he'll be able to find the solution. In regards to normalization, I do think it needs to really come with some groundwork beforehand, if that makes sense. And people have to say, I want to make peace with you, but this is affecting me. I sympathize greatly with these people, and these are kind of my things, just like I imagine the Israelis would probably say the same. So that's kind of my platform on it.
Great, thank you. So, as we mentioned, it's a spectrum, so it seems like you fall somewhere in the middle, but towards the end of normalization being okay. Just we shouldn't pretend, we shouldn't be friends and pretend like there's nothing wrong. If we're going to meet,
we should be able.
If we're going to engage, we should at least be able to have the difficult conversation about what's happening. Do you agree with that?
I want to connect to what Tarek said, and I agree with what he said. And to continue what he said, what we do, we also do with the vision of political vision that, what Tarek basically said, and correct me, Tarek, if I'm wrong, that it's not fine to normalize the occupation or the military rule, but it's fine to normalize the connections or the relationship between the people. Am I correct with what I said?
Yeah.
And the thing is that what we promote in the home, it's not just, to meet and to have a good time and get to know the people. It's also to develop vision from the bottom. And I know it's a very big thing, which is a very big thing, but the main reason, the main purpose of the home is to find a political vision that will unite Jews and Palestinians under one umbrella on one future. And we specifically promote the idea of restoration of Israeli sovereignty, which includes Palestinians as citizens and residents in Israel, also with the federal system that's going to be added to this future political system. But we are talking about to hear from the people from the bottom their grievances and their also hardships, and not only people who are people who are already got it along. I mean, I'm talking about normal people, simple people that go to work and have to stand at the checkpoint at 3 in the morning until 6 in the morning. If there is, of course, movement, there's not closure, and we want actually that people, for example, many people in Israel, I think more than, I think that there are more people from right-wing ideology rather than left-wing ideology, and they must be also part of the peace process eventually, but they are not part of the conversation. So when we bring Palestinians and people from right-wing ideology to hear from, face-to-face experience from Palestinians about what they're going through, without censorship, without whitewashing, without sugarcoating, I think it makes an effect. And it's a process that should grow. But regarding anti-normalization, it's a very counterproductive thing. And it must be fight with all means necessary, in my opinion.
Great. So before we move on to the next topic, because this leads nicely into reconciliation. Tarek, do you have anything else you want to say on normalization, or?
Well, the one thing I'm not saying this happens at all with an ONS group. Like, one thing I've noticed with a lot of the time when they try and bring Israelis and Palestinians together, with not in ONS group but with other NGOs I've seen, is that they kind of they boil it down to an individual issue. So they go, oh look, we're not Israelis and Palestinians, we're individuals, we have to get along. But the reality is we are representatives of our collective societies. And so while it's all well and good for us to have Israeli friends or Palestinian friends and vice versa, we're going to feel sympathy for either side. If there's a Jew attacked in France, an Israeli is going to feel something. When there's a war in Gaza, we're going to feel something. And so I really do hope that these normalization processes in a way do work. And I'm glad that Inon understands kind of the baggage that comes with it, which I found that not many do understand. But for many Palestinians, things like the right of return or things like this are kind of like a red line to many. And so there is a lot of baggage to it. I'm not against it, but yeah, I just want to throw that in.
I want to add to what Tarek said, that we try to bring people, and I think there must be a process where the people that are going to be sitting on the table next to each other, Israelis and Palestinians, will be those that really represent the deep aspirations from both sides, not just people that want to have a kumbaya, a nice time, but really people that represent the true, deep aspirations and identity from both sides, whether it's Palestinians who believe in right of return, or Israelis that want to rebuild the temple, for example. Like, the hard issues, these are the people that must be on the same table, in my opinion.
Cool. It seems like we have nice common ground here. Tarek, question for you, because we have someone in the comments who referred to Palestinians as pallies. Is that considered an offensive term to refer to Palestinians as pallies?
I don't think so. Think so.
Just checking. Star Hopper,
No.
You're good. You're good, but I will ask you not to spam the chat with your almost, I won't say hateful, but super intolerant comments, because you do that a lot. I'd say maybe listen a little bit more. But I do love the chat. I do appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to pull up this comment real quick. Peace equals stupidity. Well, if that's the case, then I want to be stupid. And welcome, Palestinian skeptic. I recognize you. You're in the Great Debate Discord, so I recognize the name. Good to have you here. Cool. Let's talk about reconciliation. So, you know, the clearest common ground that we reached in the discussion on normalization is the importance of talking about grievances. This brings up the question of reconciliation. It seems like any solution will need to come with some kind of process of reconciliation because there's so much deep-rooted pain and fear of one another. It's something I don't hear many politicians or activists talking about. So I ask you both, and whoever wants to take this question first, all you, do you think reconciliation is an essential part of the peace building process? And do you have ideas for what steps we can take to build this process?
Tarek, you want to begin?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I do think reconciliation is probably the most important issue because, for example, if Oslo had worked out, you would have had a lot of really angry, disgruntled Israelis and a lot of disgruntled Palestinians who would have either sympathized with the millions of Palestinians outside who are internally displaced in the West Bank and Gaza or in the camps, and also because a piece of paper doesn't really bring back a loved one. And so I do think that we need to have a national reconciliation process. How we could do that, there's people smarter than me that could come up with it. I have talked about in the past things like a sulh, that it'd probably be, you'd have to have government involvement where it'd probably go to every village and every city and kind of bring people together. Because although not all Palestinians are traditional, I myself am quite traditional. And so if members of my family make peace, the ones who've lost loved ones, then if it's sorted out between them and the Israelis, they have a proper negotiation, they discuss it, and they move on with it, then I will move on as well. And so many Palestinians, not all, but a large amount of them are quite traditional. And so with us, we do a thing, we have a sulh where if someone is killed, the elders gather together, they discuss things, and then they're able to make peace themselves. While someone negotiates peace on my behalf, as far as I'm concerned, I still have a grievance. Because that person is not negotiating on behalf of my relatives or things that have happened. And so while I don't have the answer, I definitely do believe we would need to bring about our Middle Eastern culture into this, as I've said in the past, because a simple peace deal doesn't solve it, as far as I'm concerned. As in, even if we say, even as a part of the peace deal, if it says forgive and forget, I don't think that's going to work for most people, especially in the Middle East. And so I do think we should have aspects of Middle Eastern culture a part of whatever solution we have and go around with a national reconciliation process. And especially in places like in the Bedouin sector, in Hebron, and all these places, traditions are very important. And so if the older people work it out with whatever happens, whether it's a two-state solution, a one-state solution, if they work it out and accept it, then we'll accept it as well.
Thanks, Tarek. Inon?
I think that reconciliation is important, but it should be left in not too much of a major place or focus, especially in the beginning, in my opinion, because it tends to bring us and the atmosphere to the past, towards something that we cannot really change. And it can arise a lot of emotions that can prevent us from growing together towards the future. And I'm saying this because I'm seeing a lot of what is so-called peace industry that speaks a lot about the past and the hardships, the grievances, the injustices. And by the way, they do it mostly for the Palestinian side without the Israeli side, not in a balanced way. And I understand, of course, that Palestinians now obviously are the weak side. But I think that once we want to get to somewhere together, we need to more focus about the future with something that's strengthening us rather than something that makes us feel ashamed or feel sad about the past towards something that we cannot really change. And that also connects to the victim mentality that it seems to me, and Tarek, correct me if I'm wrong, that Palestinians are much more living the past rather than living the reality or trying to think about the future. whether the Nakba or the Naksa or a relative one that got killed or murdered, or whatever with Israel with Jews. But we also have the same thing. We also had, and I remember the Second Intifada, the numerous of lives and victims, civilians. But I try not to put the emphasis on that, because I know that once I will start talking about that, I'm going to create the condition that's going to make people stuck in the past. And I think practically advancing forward towards the future, we need to make a reconciliation. Let's say after a couple of political steps that will come along the way, we need to make a reconciliation committee between the Jewish and the Palestinians in all over the land, something similar to what happened in South Africa, only to our style here. And I think that Israel should build a memorial museum for the Nakba, let's say in Lod or Ramle, maybe Dir Yassin, something to recognize the wrongdoings of the past. And of course, the Palestinians have to do similar things from their side. So that's my thought about that.
I do
Great.
think that we. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just real quick. We're hearing some static from your end, so it's either your mic is rubbing on your shirt and it's making a noise.
Maybe like this.
Yeah, try to. Well, I don't know. Anyone listening to just audio of this is going to be pretty annoyed. Let's see.
Maybe if I would talk with only one.
Yeah. You fixed it. Great.
In regards to the victim mentality, well, and us living in the past and not looking towards the future, well, that's because that is true to an extent. But most Palestinians, there is no future. I'm sure with the status quo, there's nothing. Like, the economy's terrible. There's not much to live for. It's nearly, I've said it before, the amount of Palestinians I know who are in debt is to loan sharks, not even to banks, to loan sharks, because they haven't been paid in 6-7 months. It's quite high. And so when you're going through one problem after another problem after another problem, you're always going, in my opinion, you're going to look back to something which you don't even know, like something your grandparents' time, and think, wow, before this time, everything was all good. Oh, if you know history, it wasn't all fine. There was a lot of problems back then as well. But at the same time, there wasn't loan sharks. There wasn't a lot of well, there were, but there wasn't like this now, where people don't get paid for 6-7 months. And so I think we have a lot of the time, we have a victim mentality because we have a feeling of powerlessness. It's not only the Israelis. The fact is that we have no influence over what Area A or the little areas we have. Whether it's Gaza or Area A, the average Palestinian, both living there in the diaspora, feels powerless against not only the Israelis, but the people running the show. And so it's true. We do have you would say, I guess you'd call it a victim mentality. But for example, if I talk to a Palestinian in a mullah and I say, just change the situation, he'll laugh at me. If I say, just go out on the streets and get involved in politics, he will genuinely laugh. He's like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? I don't unless you know someone, or unless you have a lot of money or this big, gigantic family, there's not much you can do. And so it's not only the Israelis, but you have a feeling of powerlessness in your own area. And so that probably is why we do have a victim mentality in that regards. Although, if there was a proper plan laid out, and then they agreed to reconciliation later on, 100%, I'd be for that. I do think that it is important, though. I know you want to do it later on. I do think it is important that it would have an actual set date. So if we got A, B done, C would be reconciliation, because that is going to be an issue. Just like how you said you want to bring together the radicals from both sides. Well, the radicals tend to have blood. They tend to have lost blood or lost land on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. And so if it was guaranteed when there would be reconciliation, then 100% be for it. But I do think it is a vital part. It would have to be done soon. It'd have to be not like with Oslo, how it's like, we'll sort it out in 5 years. It'd have to be like, no, here's the date. We're going to actually, there's no moving it around. We'd have to set it up, because especially on the Palestinian side, it is hard to move on. And so if we can at least have it out in the open, then I think it would help us move forward. That's for us anyway. You guys would have your own concerns, what you'd need to address. But for most Palestinians, it is, and I'm glad that, for example, Inon and others acknowledge it, just as I think we should acknowledge some of the stuff we've done as well. It is very important for us anyway. Maybe we're a very sensitive people, who knows? But it is quite important for us to have it out in the open, because a piece of paper means nothing to us, to be honest with you. For me, what's important is, right now I'm living in Australia, so I have a way better life than anyone in my family. But right now I'm talking to you guys. My family in Hebron has a lot of property in Hadar Street, where there's so much tension, where there's a lot of problems. I can't be like, oh, everything's all well and good. Oh, don't worry, I have to talk about on their behalf as well. I can't sit here and ignore what happened in '94, just as I'm sure Inon can't ignore what happened in 2001 and 2000 and afterwards. And so I do think reconciliation is, for me anyway, is probably one of the primary issues, regardless of whether it's 2 states, 1 state, federal, canton, whatever we choose. Especially for Palestinians who have family in Gaza and the West Bank, reconciliation is a very, very important process, because maybe it is guilt that I, for example, would not feel very comfortable meeting with people knowing I have family in Hebron who have to walk through checkpoints just to go to their homes and to work and have been subject to curfews while I'm living a good life. Like, I would need their permission. I would want to make sure they're okay and their grievances are settled. So, yeah.
I hear you, Tarek, and again, I want to here put the point on the peace industry, most of the Israeli peace organizations, that they focus so much on that and keep the situation basically stuck in the past. And I totally hear you. I mean, from what I learned about the Palestinian society, and correct me again if I'm wrong, but the Palestinian society is much more affected by emotions rather than from, let's say, rational things. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not racist. I don't think that all Palestinians are just emotional.
Oh, Palestinians, most are emotional people. Yeah, of course, we're an emotional people
Right.
most of the time.
So the door in.
I say passionate, actually. I'll say passionate.
Yeah.
I'll push back. I'll say passionate people.
I agree. Passionate, and also with a lot of belief, something that I truly admire. But the thing is that, in order to get into that door of, enter the door of the emotions of the enemy right now, let's say, okay? If we use the thing of victimization or reconciliation about things about the past, I think this thing will stay stuck, because this is what happens in most of the peace organizations I know. From the Israeli side, people that from the Israeli side come to Palestinians with their heads down, without self-respect, and basically pumping the victim mentality on the Palestinians, and I see it going so much, and I'm so sick of it. And I think that the way to also to answer the issue of emotions and reconciliation with respect.
Sorry to interrupt you. Take your headphone out. We could hear you if you put your headphone down. It's just there's static, yeah.
Again, sorry about that. I can barely hear myself. But if we can take respect and reconciliation and emotions to a place that speaks about something concrete for the future rather than just focusing on the past, I think that we will make a huge step towards the future together, without the blaming game and the victim and all that, all the things that comes along.
Yeah, I can agree that it doesn't help anyone just to be emotional for the sake of being emotional. I definitely agree with that. I can speak on behalf of many, many Palestinians when I say that for us anyway, with the reconciliation, and I won't go back to it, but as in, for us, once it's solved between the person, it's done. And as long as it's there, it's going to keep on bubbling up. So, for example, it's not just between it's not just between Palestinians and Jews. I think there needs to be one between Palestinians and Druze. Since the first Intifada, there's been a lot of tension between Palestinians and Druze since the first Intifada. I know.
I just want to put an emphasis, because Druze sounds an awful lot like Jews.
Druze.
Druze.
Yeah.
Feel free to explain, elaborate on it.
They're like they speak Arabic. They're an ethno-religious group. They're in the north, mainly in the Galilee. There's, I think, around 100,000 of them. They have their own religion. They're very ethnocultural, like ethnocentric people. Very nice. But during the first Intifada, there was a lot of clashes between us and them, because they all serve in the Israeli army, and they were very passionate in putting down the protest. And a lot of Palestinians suffered. And since then, we've had a lot of tension. So it's not just between us and Israelis. Well, they're Israeli too, not just between us and Jewish people, but us and the Druze community. And for us, once it's solved, it's solved. I think the problem with what Inon has is that he is used to Israelis coming in his experience and telling Palestinians, think about this, this, and that. And it does sound like a pity party. For me, I want to move on. I want to solve the problem. but I have relatives that need they need to have their concerns addressed. That's how it is for me and many Palestinians. I think it does sound like we want sympathy. No, we want to just be like, okay, this happened, good, let's do this and that, and move on. Because really, I want to solve the problem, whether it's a one-state federal solution, whether it's a two-state solution, whatever the solution is. I want to improve the lives of all the people here. But it's very hard for me to do that when there's some concerns. I would, and that's something which I think most Palestinians can relate to. I just want, it's not something where like, oh, look, feel sorry for me. It's, look, my auntie has this problem. She's gone through A, B, and C. Can we work this out? Okay, good. We can work it out. Now let's move on. I don't recommend at all what Inon is talking about, how people come in and tell Palestinians, oh, you should feel sad, sad, sad. If they're doing that, I'm against that. That's not my idea of reconciliation.
Because it's also putting the people themselves, keeping them in weakness.
Yeah,
And it's also a method, a tool to control people even more effectively afterwards.
yeah, I do hear many Israelis, and I see a parallel also in America with the Black community, how they're very focused on their struggle, and they're accused of having a strong victim complex, right? Just victim mentality. And in many ways, we could identify why having a victim complex would be disempowering for a population. But I think we can't only just look at a victim complex and say why it's not good. We need to understand what conditions create a victim complex in a population. So, and again, we don't understand the full psychology behind this, but what happens to a population after so many years of being ruled by another military force that is not their own? That alone, that power dynamic, put aside Palestinians that have been killed or home searches or home demolitions, right? Even put that aside, just being controlled by people who are not your own seems to play a very large psychological toll. And it's hard to understand what that psychological toll is. But if you pay attention to populations who are living in areas where those in power, they do not view as their own, it seems those populations often develop what we define as victim complex. So I think on one hand, we can identify issues we see with victim complex, but also be empathetic to where it arises from. Feel free to comment on that, both of you, but Tarek, I would also additionally like to ask you, what conditions do you think would need to be met for your family to be happy and to feel like forgiveness can take place?
Oh, look, I'm not asking, like, I put it this way, if what Inon and other people see as reconciliation is an Israeli getting down on his hands and knees, that's not what I'm asking for. That would make me very uncomfortable. And it's true, I wouldn't respect anyone who would do that. Inon's right, I would not respect someone who gets on his hands and knees and begs forgiveness. I wouldn't respect that at all. I can't speak on behalf of all Palestinians. I wish I could, I can't. I can speak on behalf of my family, which is a very large family, but if my family, for example, if my aunt is able to walk around like Al Shuhada Street, and I know it's a complex situation. It is complex. Unfortunately, that is the problem with our conflict, is that it is not simply cut and dry. In my opinion, the condition how Palestinians are living, that is a simple situation. But I know why there's certain rules. I know I've had Israelis explain it to me, and I don't agree with them, but I understand the Israeli mindset, the rationale. I understand why security is such a high priority for them. But the thing is that because I am a traditional Palestinian, I cannot just come here and be like, oh, let's all go drink coffee, let's all have the best time in the world. Because members of most of my family is living in a bad situation. For example, before I agreed to this talk today, I just messaged my family saying, hey, I'm going to chat with this guy. He seems like a very nice man. Adar's nice, Inon's nice. And they said, yeah, sure. Just make sure that you don't forget about us in Hebron. That's what they say. Just don't forget about us. And that is the one thing, is that when we are talking, it's about not forgetting them in a way. And with their concerns met, I think that really the bar is very low now. I'm sure Inon knows, he interacts with Palestinians all the time. The bar gets lower and lower every year because the situation gets worse and worse every year. There are Palestinians that genuinely just want to be able to work now. Like, they literally, I've met Palestinians that say, I don't care anymore. I just want to be able to feed my family and work. That's what they say. So the bar gets lower and lower every year. I'm not I wish I was older, but I'm not. It would need to be an older man from my family to go and discuss, but it would not be like this he would go and discuss the situation, and he would speak on behalf of me and my family. Now, that's not the case with all Palestinians, but I am quite traditional. An older member of my family would go and talk, sort it out, and whatever he decides, and then, yeah, if he says it's all fine, it's all fine, as far as I'm concerned. Not all Palestinians are like this, but a nice amount are. So when I say, but then again, there are other Palestinians who are more liberal. They might want an apology. They might want this. But for me, I'm not asking for an Israeli to get down on his knees. I'm just saying I cannot come here and dance and sing with you guys until other members of my family are okay, if that makes sense.
But are there specific conditions that you
Well, I know my family in Hebron would like to be able to access their shops in Al Shahada Street. I know my family would like to, like they have shops there. I know they'd like to be able to actually access them. I know that my family in Hebron would like the soldiers, if they're going to be there in Hebron, the Israeli soldiers, to be more unbiased. And I get it. Look, if I was an Israeli, I would they're not Palestinian. I understand it. But some of those things like that, like being able to access their property, having someone to go to when there's something wrong, who are they going to go to? The Red Cross, the International Red Cross Committee thing. They're good for occasionally getting the checkpoints open, but that's it. Like, there's no Palestinian to go to. Who are they going to go to if they have a problem? And so, if there is someone for the Palestinians to actually go to when they're being harassed, or if there's a problem, and if my family can access their shops, I'm sure there won't be an issue.
Great. I want to address a comment by Starhopper. What is the point of discussing checkpoints, walls, etc., if they don't bother to mention why they're there in the first place? So, I think most people have an understanding that a lot of the protocol that exists in the West Bank is for security reasons, and there's a history of violence. I don't think that there's a need to bring up these same talking points every single time because they make you feel good in order to have a conversation. We're looking to make progress. We're looking to find solutions. I could sit here all day and hit the same talking points, but that's not what we're trying to do. But I will agree with you that security is a major issue, and a lot of what Israel does is for security reasons. Happy? I'll let Tarek and Inon also speak on this if they'd like to.
No, I think you said what needs to be said, but we're not taking it off the table. It's going to be, like any topic, going to be raising for discussion anyway. But to put it again and again and again simply doesn't take us anywhere further. And regarding, the checkpoints and the walls, eventually someone will have to take them out, but it's going to be Israel in the end of the day because Israel has the power. And I think it needs to be done in a way that both Israelis and most Israelis will feel totally safe to do it without outside pressure from either the US or European Union or whoever foreign power. And eventually that's what's going to be, because we're not going to be with these walls and with these checkpoints forever. It can be next year, it can be 10 years from now, it can be 100 years, but eventually they will go off, and eventually this land will be one whole unit, WHOLE. And this is also the key to peace, because the separation also to the two-state solution that was tried and failed didn't take us anywhere towards peace. It just separated us, and now there's a generation of Palestinians like Tarek living here in Palestine or in Israel that don't know the other, don't know Israelis, don't know Jews, they only know Israelis and Jews from checkpoints or from, the army. And, eventually we need to find a way to live here together. Eventually.
Well, just adding to Anon's point, I really hope it's not 100 years, fingers crossed, or 10 years. And I do understand. Look, my family, I lived in Where There's Yours, and some of my family's in the old city. I remember being there during the first Intifada. I remember it. I 100%. That's the thing. I understand the Israeli concerns. I don't like catching buses. I don't. Even in Australia, it took time to get used to catching buses. Nothing happened to me, but I remember seeing on the news every single day. So I understand the Israeli concerns. I really do. But we have to understand it is a complex situation. just like Palestinians have to understand why Israelis don't want to do things, and Israelis have to understand Palestinian grievances. Because, for example, many Palestinians like to romanticize how it was before 1948, and Israelis will tell you, oh, it was actually like this, there was the Hebron massacre, there was this and that. And many Israelis like to romanticize how it was before the Intifada. And don't get me wrong, I've heard stories how, you could drive from one place to another, everyone was making money. But it happened for a reason as well. There was issues. And so I think if we're honest with each other, we can hopefully work this out. If we're honest, okay, the wall's like this. One of my main issues with the wall is that it goes in between Palestinian towns. Like it's cutting off Abu Dis from where there's yours. It's cutting off all these places. I don't understand if you want to protect it. I know at the time we were in negotiations for a two-state solution. So why don't you put it like, I can get even putting it around the settlements, but putting it in between Palestinian areas? I don't understand that. But I'm not involved in security. But yeah, I hope it comes down sooner than 10 or 100 years. But I do think Palestinians need to understand why Israelis want up there. And I do think Israelis need to understand why, I don't support any of the actions that took place, but why there were protests in the first place. But
want to add also to what
yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because it's been, I think it's been 20 years, or almost 20 years since the first Intifada. It was a bad time for both sides. Just like I have friends from Jenin who tell me how terrible it was. And also it was like every day on the news, you'd hear something. Either a bomb went off here or people were shot in this protest here. And so we do need to, I recommend reading Israeli history. I recommend Israelis reading Palestinians' point of view as well. That will really help the situation, in my opinion.
I really appreciate what you say, Tarek. And I think that, from what I saw in the social media or in the media in general about the Palestinian conversation, I saw no understanding and no even will to understand what the Israelis were also feeling. And it should be, we need to feel your pain, your problems, and so you need to feel ours. And it needs to be again with people that represent the heart, the core of the identity from both sides. And when there's going to be people, let's say from the leadership of the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria that has also the nationalistic, the spiritual, with also humane connection to be with the table with Palestinians, I think that we will advance in a very, very major way. And this is also the place to give a shout out to my friend Yehuda Cohen, who is the leader of the Vision Movement. And I really recommend hearing his lectures about these topics. And also shout out to Rudy Rahman, who does an amazing job. And you know him also, Tarek, Adar. And again, people that connect Palestinians and Israelis from, people that really bring something different to the table, something very different from the traditional peace industry that we have that, as you see, I kind of don't really like. I don't know if it's kind of understood. But I think this industry needs to be dismantled and drowned from money and give all the money to us to do things properly.
So, well, first of all, I don't know what's going on, but you turned awfully yellow in the last 10 minutes. Are you feeling okay, or are you in a tanning booth? What's going on? What's going on over there?
It's better to have than Corona, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you have no way to fix it, I guess we'll.
Yeah, I can try to close this live. Just a second, I'll be back.
Yeah, no problem. I just want the best viewing experience as possible. That's all. Doing it for you all. Anyways, for those who did not join the Great Debate Discord server, please do so. There is a link in the description. Maybe Brother Eli, maybe you want to drop it in the comments as well so people have easy access. After this discussion, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap up this live in 15, 20 minutes, and then we're going to go to Discord, where we're going to also be on video chat, but everyone else can join the video chat. You don't need to have your video on. You could just contribute with voice or even text, and we're going to have like a nice little, what we call an after party, but we could ask more questions. You guys can all share your thoughts. It's kind of a little dialogue that we're going to engage in. So let's all join the Discord. You should see it in the description of this video. What can we do to move forward? What are practical next steps aside from conversations like this, which is clear? We need more conversations. We need to engage in dialogue. We need to address the difficult issues head on. What more can we do?
Is the question to us?
Yeah.
Well, I think that we need to do what we do in the home. We need to make a grassroots movement that is 180 degrees away from the peace industry, both the path and the solution, and invest most of these efforts to build intercommunal connections in Judea and Samaria between the Palestinian and the Jewish communities. And we also need to put a vision of unification and not of division. And I think that also important that also speaking about Israel as an Israeli Jew, I think that we need to stop getting American orders, stop getting American green lights regarding any political moves we do here in this land, and therefore to be fully independent, to make peace, real peace with the Palestinians, and peace that's going to connect Israel to the Middle East. And again, all from the bottom, all from the people that are basically representing the narrative, the story, the identity of both sides, which is, in my opinion, the Palestinian refugees and the Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria. And also to clean a lot of trash, of course.
Well, in regards to path of the future, whatever the situation is, whether I don't see, for example, I do believe that Palestinians have the right to self-determination. I just don't think it's going to happen. That's what I believe. And so I do believe it's going to be a one state. And so if that's going to happen, I think we should try and make it a best one state as possible. I do think we should have, hopefully anyway, autonomy in certain areas. I would like that. But whatever happens, I really do think localism needs to be, like, it needs to be promoted, in my opinion, because each town is different, and I think that that's one of the best things about Palestinian society. Well, I'm not speaking about Israeli solution, but whatever happens, I do think that there needs to be more local initiatives, both from the grassroots and also from the families living in all the villages. And I think that we as Palestinians, Inon seems to be more comfortable than most Israelis talking about the refugee issue. For many Palestinians right now, the main concern for us is what is going to happen, as in, will we still be here, in a way? Because even though many Israelis talk about the demographic threat, if you go to the West Bank, everyone's trying to leave. The situation's untenable. And the idea that, like, as in, I know, like, it does seem like a demographic threat, like we have lots of children, but in reality, like, every Palestinian has someone in these families overseas. Everyone has a brothers in America or brothers in Europe or a cousin here or a cousin there. Everyone is trying to leave. And so I want to make conditions on the ground better where that Palestinians can stay, some can return, or all can return, hopefully, and they can actually express their culture and live out and life's not going to be easy, but at least living a meaningful life. And that is the number one concern for me and many Palestinians. And so hopefully, whether it's one state, which seems to be where it's heading, I really hope there's more local initiatives, because if something's all run from Jerusalem or all run from here, then we're going to have a slightly better situation than what we have now, where places are neglected, streets are neglected, there's no parks, there's no this. Well, if it's outsourced to towns, that's what I believe is a big problem, is that if there's more local initiatives, if there's more power in local municipalities, things can sort themselves out a lot better. While all Palestinians have a common language, there is differences. For example, people in Ramallah tend to be more secular than people in Hebron. People in Beit Lahem are much, Beit Jala, Beit Zahor, parts of Beit Lahem are Christian. And Nablus has its own unique culture as well in that way. And I want that to be preserved and protected. And so I think that more localism is the answer. Regardless of whatever the solution, I think that definitely localism needs to be enforced. Well, not enforced, but,
This is the place also to add the point of what we promote in the home. We basically promote a federal idea that combines Arab federalism, which is based on Dr. Mordechai Keidar's outlines, which is kind of similar to how the United Arab Emirates are assembled as a political entity, which is very successful, very working, very rich, very prosperous. And adding that to Western European federal concept, which is based on the Swiss model, which is, again, Switzerland is a federal state with different cantons, with different local rules, that also preserve the identity of each and every region and combine them into one system, which is under Israeli sovereignty, where Palestinians, again, are part of it as citizens and residents. And that means that every canton or every emirate can preserve their own identity and have their own autonomy, both Jewish and Palestinian, also Jews and also Bedouin, and manifest the idea of unity and not uniformity. That's something that I think will work eventually, and I think that's going to be the future. But we need to speak about it. We need to bring people that really represent the identity from both sides again, and be on the same table, and really listen to each other with also representing the identity that they're coming from. And Tarek mentioned also the right of return for Palestinians, which I understand is a sacred right, sacred thing which is very deep in their souls. But I think that there must be also recognition of the Israeli Jewish justice, which restoring our sovereignty over, where we were kicked out of 2,000 years ago. And I'm not putting the blame on the Palestinians, of course. By the way, speaking about identity, I think that some portion of the Palestinians have also Jewish roots. And I don't think that the Palestinians should convert to Judaism again or something like that. But I think that we need to also figure out a way to include also history in a way that can connect us for a better future and create something that will inspire from this land out to this region with a lot of failed states like Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Libya. And eventually I hope that the process that we're gonna end in genuine, true, real peace is gonna be something that will inspire humanity. And I think that this is the role that we need ourselves to play in the history that we live in.
Just in regard, I definitely do support, obviously, I'm going to reiterate the Palestinian right to self-determination, but we're going to have a federal, I would prefer the Swiss model than the Emirates model, just based purely because of, while it's definitely true, I've read briefly on Dr. Mordechai Gedar, some of his writings. In the past, that was 100% the case. Like, don't get me wrong, in places like in Hebron, it's still very traditional, very tribal. But now Palestinians, because of the wall and because of the occupation, military rule, won't get into it, I guess, Palestinians are now moving from city to city. So if you go to Bethlehem, for example, Bethlehem now, a lot of the people there, especially the Muslim population, Bethlehem, not all, but many of them have only moved there because Bethlehem's one of the few places where tourists go. It's one of the few places you can find a job. If you go to Ramallah now, Ramallah is filled with people, especially in Ramallah and Al-Bideh. Many people from Hebron are moving there now. And so I do think we should have, obviously, I wouldn't mind a federal solution, but if we're going to base it on Emirates, it could lead to, I think in the past it would have 100% worked, but now I think it could lead to some problems because now many people are moving from one place to another. Like Jerusalem, I think the majority of Palestinians in Jerusalem have at least one grandparent from Hebron originally, because so many people have moved there. And so regardless of whether it's, I understand that way of thinking. I would prefer a Swiss-based system in a way, although because I do want to preserve the local cultures of each place. But the thing is, right now in the current situation we're going now, my family, nearly everyone is moving to Ramallah because it's one of the few places. Inon talks about the peace industry. The one thing about the peace industry is it's creating jobs in Ramallah. Nowhere else, but it's creating jobs in Ramallah. And it has a trickle-down effect. And so the original people in Ramallah, they're the minority now. I think there's more people in America who are originally from Ramallah. There's more Ramallah people in America than actual Ramallah itself. Ramallah was a tiny village. Now look at it, it's massive. And so that's like my personal issue with the plan. But I'm all for the hopefulness. And in regards to Israeli sovereignty, if that was the price to bring every refugee back, I would 100%. And well, I know we talk about reconciliation before making promises. I myself, not my family, if bring every refugee back meant, okay, under Israeli sovereignty, because to be honest with you, one of the biggest things that's affecting many Palestinians is just like how Israelis, their heart breaks when they see what happens to Jews in France and other countries around the world. Well, for us, we see what's happening to Palestinians in Syria. We see what's happening to Palestinians. What happened to Palestinians in Kuwait, how they're all kicked out. And so for many Palestinians, it doesn't seem to be a place to go. Now, will that happen? I don't think so. I think it is much more likely that we will have a one-state solution. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents thrown in.
Regarding the canton model, it doesn't have to be only emirate or only cantons. It can be also, combination of both. something that fits. For example, Hebron fits the idea of the
Yeah, it does.
Emirates, for example.
It does, yeah.
Definitely does. It's much more tribal, much more traditional.
Yeah.
But like you said, and I agree with you, with Ramallah, for example, where people are much more modern, much more Western, a Swiss model can fit there more. But again, it's, think about gradualism. Think about,
Yeah, of course.
or try to think about, also right of return. I support right of return for all Palestinians living inside the land as a first step, okay? I'm going to be honest. I think that every Palestinian from Bethlehem, Hebron, Ramallah, Jenin, within the framework of Israeli sovereignty should live in Yafo, in Haifa, in Beersheba, in Jerusalem, only also if Jews can live in these places too. And it's going to be in Israeli rule. That's my opinion. And I think that's what's going to work eventually. But, speaking about Palestinians from outside of the land, that's something that should be discussed, after we're going to agree on, the first thing, then it's going to be much easier to speak how to solve this issue. Because, the Palestinian right of return from the outside is a very, 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 that's probably one of the most of the core issues, it's even more than self-determination for Palestinians, and correct me if I'm wrong here. But this issue should also...
For many, yeah, it is in, for example, for many Palestinians, it does feel strange that we're negotiating, were anyway, when Oslo was happening, it feels strange to negotiate for what was at the time was supposed to be what people said, West Bank and Gaza, when the majority of Palestinians don't live in West Bank or Gaza. And for a lot of them, what happens to the ones in the camps in Lebanon? What happened to the ones who were? We don't know where a lot of them are now, but the ones who are in Syria, they've all moved all around, the ones. And also the one thing is this, is that it is the overwhelming amount of Palestinians will support the right of return. But there's just one thing for the Israelis is this, is life isn't easy for Palestinians. It doesn't mean that they're going to come. As in, I can never tell a Palestinian who doesn't feel at home in America or whatever, that he shouldn't be able to return to Jaffa. Now, does that mean he'll do it? Because, one thing that Israelis have to understand is Palestinians are human beings. I've lived in Australia now for the majority of my life. Every time I go to Jerusalem, the first 2 weeks, I wanted to pull my hair out. No one follows rules. No one listens to, everyone drives really badly. There's no queuing. There's all these problems. And I literally want to go back to Australia, but then once I'm back in Australia, I want to come back. I don't think, the right of return is a right. I don't think people are going to jump on it, though. That is the thing. I don't, life is hard there. The right is in, so that is the one thing, is that I can never tell a Palestinian to give up on what he believes is his right to return. I could never do that. Will I think that they'll move on and accept it? No. If you go to Chile is filled with Palestinians. It's the biggest population of Palestinians outside of the Middle East. They all love Palestine. They all they have a soccer team and everything. None of them are coming. None of them they're not coming back. I think the ones in Lebanon, Jordan, the ones who are suffering definitely want to. But I think it's a tough one, because it's something which makes Israelis uncomfortable because they think of millions of Palestinians coming in, but also makes Palestinians very uncomfortable because, especially ones like myself from the West Bank, from whose family is in Jerusalem and Hebron, whatever deal happens, most likely I will be okay. But then I won't be able to look at the other Palestinians in the eye. That's the kind of thing. As in, at the end of the day, what is a nation but an extended family? And so it is a tough one for us, if that makes sense. As in, will they act on it? Who knows? But it is something which is, for many Palestinians, non-negotiable. Just like, for example, with Inon and others, the idea of separating the land is non-negotiable, or the idea of kicking all the Israelis out of the West Bank for Inon is definitely non-negotiable. So it's something we will have to work out, definitely. But it's something which probably neither of us will budge on.
And also regarding the hard issues, when we put the Palestinian right of return from the outside, what about, for example, the idea of rebuilding the temple or praying on Temple Mount, for example? These are the type of issues that, we cannot ignore. I mean, we must speak about, all issues without taking some out, very, very...
Oh, we'll definitely have to talk about it, yeah. We'll definitely have to talk about it. So for, that's the thing, for example,
Sorry to cut you, but once we put the people, like you, like me, like Yehuda, like Rudy, like Ishai Fleischer, for example, to be in the discussion, speaking about the future, I think there's going to be magic because I see it happen, in the room, in the closed room. And this is also the place to give shout out to my Palestinian friends who I cannot mention by names. And I have to work tirelessly hours on the computer, blurring their faces. It's such an annoying process. But if we're not gonna speak about the truth, and we have to hide about our identities and what we really want, we will not progress. When the fact that you can speak, you can do it because you not under the Palestinian authorities' rule. And
Well,
I think so.
agree that
I mean,
I agree that it's definitely a problem in regards to people not being able to talk. But like I said before, if we're going to talk, we have to, like you said, air our grievances. And look, just like, for example, most Israelis will disagree with me on my position on the right of return, or at least are uncomfortable with the idea. I, for example, and it's no disrespect, would be uncomfortable or disagree with the idea of the Temple Mount at the moment, just because of what I've learned living among when I go back to visit, is that Israelis are Middle Eastern people, which is something which many Palestinians, when they realize, Israel, it's a very tough thing that many Palestinians who have not been there see Israelis as Europeans.
dude, I
Unfortunately,
look more Arab than you right now.
at the moment, in summer it will change, but unfortunately they are Middle Eastern people, and so for me, I can understand the Israeli wanting an idea of wanting to pray at either Al-Aqsa or Qubbat al-Sakhra, but because they're Middle Eastern people, for me that kind of makes me uncomfortable. Just like, for example, many Israelis are uncomfortable with the right of return, because they know that Middle Eastern people, they are tribal, and if something happens, they know what's going to happen. And for me, it's kind of the same situation where, because Israelis are Middle Eastern people, do I trust them 100% with running? I don't. I kind of like what Jordan's doing right now. I don't like. I admit the wife can be harsh. I don't. I admit they can be harsh, and I hope we can sort out the situation. But just like, for example, most Israelis are uncomfortable with millions of Palestinians coming back to the land because we are Middle Eastern, and we're not European. It can be a bit brutal. I think myself and many Palestinians are uncomfortable with the idea of sharing, because sharing between us, good fence. I don't agree with the good fences make good neighbors, because I think it sounds like I'm endorsing the wall. But I would like us to share the land in a way. But yeah, that's one thing where we'll talk about it. But just like, I think the right of return makes many Israelis uncomfortable, but for us it's non-negotiable. I think it's the same situation with Al-Aqsa as what's it called, Inon called a Temple Mount. It's
It all depends how we put
non-negotiable
it.
for many things.
It all depends how we put it in the details of what it means, because like peace means different things to us. Also, what's going to be the futuristic condition of Temple Mount or Haram Sharif, or the futuristic situation of the right of return, Haki al-Auda. These are all things that need to be discussed to the points, but needs to be with the people that really represent the identities that they are coming from, and without foreign interference also.
I do oh, sorry, I just want to quickly just throw in one thing that's right.
Yeah,
In regards to foreign interference, I do understand many in Israel. I have heard this from both Israelis and Palestinians who don't like the idea of foreign interference. I have heard this, and I can understand, and many times it does. The one thing that annoys me is, for example, if when I was in Turkey one time, I got into an argument and someone told me, "What, like, why don't you go and fight for your country?" I was like, and he was just telling me, and I'm like, "There's nothing." What? I didn't like being told what to do by other people, and so I understand many Israelis and Palestinians not wanting foreign countries to get involved. Just like, because of, as and others have pointed out, because there is an imbalance of power, many Palestinians will be very hesitant to that part. I do think that it is important to get to know the Israeli perspective, to understand where they're coming from. But for many Palestinians, there are one of the few decks they have in their, like one of the few cards they have in their deck is the fact that so many countries care about here. Now, it hasn't worked in our favor. It hasn't done much. But it is kind of, for many Palestinians, the idea, knowing that so many countries care about it. And maybe because we don't know Israelis. Maybe if we got to know Israelis better, we wouldn't be as worried about it. But because of the Israelis of the IDF, many Palestinians are uncomfortable with the idea of foreigners not being involved, if that makes sense, because that kind of is a backup for us. It hasn't worked out, hasn't helped very much. If anything, a lot of the money that's coming in has just made things worse. But yeah, that's something which we'll probably have to talk about as well.
Great. I would like to move to questions. We're only going to take 2 questions, so please ask the questions. We'll ask the ones we like more. The responses will be fairly quick, and then we'll continue in the after party. So, guys, again, if you haven't already, join the Discord. That's where the after party will take place. While you ask questions, actually a comment I do want to address. Starhopper. Starhopper, I know you don't think that I appreciate your presence here, but I do, because I like that we have a diversity of different approaches and opinions. And I think it's just important to understand the different narratives. And I think you, in one way or another, make this chat a little bit more entertaining. So thank you. Just try to be a little bit more open-minded. You're confusing hateful with realistic. So I want to address this because I hear this a lot. There's like, it's almost a narrative that seems to be becoming more popular. It's like, I'm not being hateful. I'm just telling the truth. We hear it often in politics. Ben Shapiro is often given credit for being truthful, right? He's so truthful. He just says it how it is. Trump says it how it is, right? It's like super virtuous. So I want to make it clear. There's no virtue in truth if that truth does not help progress a positive goal. Okay, truth alone doesn't mean much. If you go up to someone on the street and yell at them, yell in their ear, the sky is blue, the sky is blue, the sky is blue. You're telling the truth, but you're also being annoying. So there's no virtue in that truth. If you go up to a person who's clearly overweight and you say, hey, you're fat, you're telling the truth. But is that helpful? So again, there's no virtue in truth if it doesn't help progress a goal. So I don't care if you say you're being realistic. Even if you are being realistic, it's about progressing goals we want to progress. If you have an agenda for progressing more division, more fear, more hate, well then yeah, that is the truth you are speaking. Fine, I'll give you that. But that's not what we're here to do. We want to speak truth, but we want to speak a truth that brings people together. So, Brother Starhopper, good to have you here, but just keep that in mind.
Social media becomes such a platform for people with hateful and this kind of conversation. What's bad, how to bash the other, and all that stuff. And there's so many other people that looking for something different than the thing that separates us, or tell only the truth from that side. They try to think and look for something much more meaningful, and it's very, very hard to develop it on social media because it only mostly focuses on a lot of drama and hate and division between people. So,
I'd say I'm trying to be more positive on this one. Usually I'm quite cynical. And look, I think being a cynic means life's, it's a constant surprise. Life surprises you, things are easy, especially where we live. I usually am quite cynical. I don't expect things to happen anytime soon. And yeah, I think all we can do is air our grievances and, to be honest, stick by, and this is just for Palestinians anyway, just like, if you're going to talk, stick by your principles, put things out there. And yeah, look, in a way with Starhopper's comment, he's being realistic. It is real. I think he reflects the opinion of many people on both sides. Right now, the biggest issue that any Palestinian will have with me talking to you and Inon tonight is that it's a waste. They'll say it's a waste. That's what they'll say. They'll say the army's not going to leave. We're going to stay suffering. It's a waste of time. Maybe they're right, but we'll try and be positive. And I think it's the same with the Israelis. Most Israelis, especially considering how the peace talks have gone, I imagine most Israelis think talking peace is a waste of time, in my opinion anyway.
Also, Tarek, look at the situation, like where we've been all over the world. Like only last March, everything was quite normal. We could go anywhere we wanted. We could fly. There was, football on TV, sports, everything. But everything changed so much dramatically. That's why I think, the peace between Israelis and Palestinians is possible and will happen. And I come also from the point of believing in that peace because it's written in the Torah, in the Tanakh. And I'm committed to believe in that. I'm not, it's not for me to say when, or for anyone for that matter, but to believe that it will happen. I get my faith that it will happen only from the Torah, from the Nevi'im, from the prophets.
So, yeah,
again, be positive.
I want to semi push back, but semi agree, because me being secular, I don't think religion in itself is gonna solve our problems. But I think we need to accept the reality that we have a deeply religious population. 50% of Israelis, and I imagine more than 50% of Palestinians are religious. So using religion as part of the peace process seems to be an effective way forward. So I am with you on that. But I don't think peace will come from God coming down and giving us peace. I just think it's a tool that we can use.
It's part of the reality here, and we cannot ignore humanity, and we cannot ignore nationalism. We cannot ignore faith. We cannot ignore God. It's all intertwined, and if we will be smart enough and passionate enough and believing enough and to find a way how to combine all these three in a balanced way, we will find the golden path. Be'ezrat Hashem, inshallah.
Inshallah. Be'ezrat Hashem, God willing. Great. I think we can move this to the after party, right? Discord? Yeah.
No issue.
Brother Tarek, Brother Inon, it's been a great pleasure. And yeah, let's head over to the after party.
And I want to
guys,
also,
whoever hasn't been yet, I'll give you last word. Also, you can get in touch with our guests by their contact information is in the description. If you haven't already liked this video, unless you don't like it, dislike it, that's cool too. We love that also. We want you to express yourself and subscribe if you like this content. Once you get to Discord, you'll see on the left-hand side, it says discussion. You click the discussion button and then you join the voice channel. That's how you do it. We'll see you there. Inon, you want to say something?
I want to direct people first and foremost to the Facebook page. Step into the home on Facebook and the website www.the-home.org. Check us out, and also to give a shout out again to Yehuda Cohen and Rudy, and especially my Palestinian friends from either the refugee camps, Bethlehem, Arub, Tukua, Husan, people that I wish could be here in this platform speaking, but I know that they cannot do it right now. But inshallah, khair, ya Rabbil Alameen, Kariban, biyikdaru, they will be able.
Amen.
And I just want to quickly throw in that while I definitely do agree with the Palestinian right to self-determination, I don't think it's happening anytime soon. And I think we are, for better and for worse, stuck with each other. So I think we need to work something out. And for any Israelis watching, I just want to quickly throw out that many of you are probably uncomfortable with many aspects of Palestinian culture. Just know that without it, probably things would be a lot worse. And so, yeah, I'll see you guys in the Discord.
Awesome. Signing out with love from Tel Aviv, Israel.